Mobili. The most legendary American muscle cars. Sports cars and supercars may be the most popular performance vehicles nowadays, but back in the 1960s and early 1970s, America was hooked on muscle cars. Usually defined as two-door sports coupes powered by big, powerful V8 engines, classic muscle cars are highly sought after as some of the most beautiful and powerful vehicles ever built. While some iconic muscle cars were built in large numbers and are easier to find and buy 50 years later, others were released in very limited numbers and are not only tough to find, but very expensive to buy. 10. 1966 Ford Fairlane 500R Code. The Fairlane was born as a full-sized model in 1955, but Ford redesigned it into a midsize in 1962. By 1966, Ford had moved the Fairlane closer to muscle car territory, and it eventually became the base for the Torino and Cobra lines. The Fairlane had already spawned a high-performance model in 1964 called the Thunderbolt, but the factory drag car was built in 100 units. The Fairlane 500R Code wasn't as aggressive, but only 57 examples left the assembly line. It featured a race-ready package that included dual Holley carburetors, front disc brakes, a lift-off hood, and a radio delete. It was also fitted with Ford's most powerful engine at the time, the 7.0-liter Cobra V8. This engine was rated at 425 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. The R-Code 66 Fairlane 500s may not have been purpose-built drag cars, but they were a track-ready factory option. This was the last year of the 427 Cobra on the Fairlane, which is a shame because it is considered the best race engine Ford ever built, and it is surprisingly more powerful than the 428s and 429s that replaced it in blue oval performance cars. 9. 1963 Chevrolet Impala Z11. Launched in 1958, the Chevrolet Impala was already in its third generation in 1963. And that's the year when Chevy introduced the first high-performance version of the sedan. Available under regular production option, RPO, Z11, this Impala was based on the Sport Coupe model, so it was available as a two-door hardtop only. Upgrades to the engine included a cowl induction air intake system, a two-piece aluminum intake manifold, dual Carter AFB carburetors, and a revised compression ratio. The Z11 looked a lot like the regular Impala on the outside, but it featured aluminum body parts. In order to cut weight, Chevy removed the radio, the front sway bar, heater, and sound-deadening material. The 7.0-liter V8 was reportedly capable of 430 horsepower and 575 pound-feet of torque, although the official rating was lower than that. Created for gearheads who like to take their big sedan to the drag strip on Sundays, the Impala Z11 was built in just 57 units and only a few of them survived. The Impala Z11 was designed specifically for drag racing, so it was built with lightweight aluminum parts, and anything unnecessary, for going fast in a straight line, was stripped out, including the front sway bars. This was the first production vehicle to hit 120 miles per hour in the quarter mile, so the Diet Chevy put it on clearly worked. 8. 1967 Dodge Coronet W23/Plymouth Belvedere RO23. General Motors and Ford weren't the only Detroit carmakers that were selling factory-prepped race cars in the 1960s. Mopar did the same, and in 1967 it released a pair of road-legal dragsters. The Dodge Coronet W23 and Plymouth Belvedere RO23 were basically identical aside from badges and small details. These cars had their batteries moved in the trunk and were devoid of unnecessary features such as a radio and the heater. Many of them came with a rear seat delete too. Both super stock category cars were powered by Mopar's then new 7.0-liter Hemi V8 engine, rated at 425 horsepower. Dodge and Plymouth built 55 units each in order to meet the NHRA's minimum for drag strip homologation. The '67 Coronet W23 was not only stripped of all unnecessary weight, it distributed the necessary weight in weird ways. Unlike pretty much every car ever made that had heavier brakes in the front, the W23 had light brakes in the front and heavy brakes in the back. This sounds like some kind of witchcraft, but it kept the extra weight in the rear over the contact patch of the race slicks, which made for a little extra grip on takeoff. 7. 1970 to 1971 Plymouth Hemi Cuda Convertible. The detail that brings this one onto this list is the convertible layout. You see, Plymouth didn't make many drop-top versions of the Cuda back then. In both 1970 and 1971, only 21 examples of the Hemi-fitted Cuda left the assembly line. That's only 10 per year and a serious contender for the rarest American muscle cars list. The low production was also due to the car's expensive price tag, which matched that of the Ford Mustang Boss 429 or Shelby GT350, both full-fledged performance cars of the era. The Plymouth Barracuda got a complete redesign for the 1970 model year and, for the first time in the nameplate's history, was finally eligible for the mighty 426 Street Hemi. The dedicated Hemi Cuda trim packs a fearsome amount of power in the relatively small pony car and makes it the quickest Mopar of the classic muscle car era. 6. 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle 454 SS LS6. Assuming you find one, of course, because this beast was built in just 20 units. The Chevelle was already a solid muscle car in the late 1960s, when it was available with a range of small and big block V8 engines. But 1970 saw the introduction of the LS6 upgrade for the 7.4-liter V8 mill. The package added a single 4-barrel Holley carburetor that increased power to 450 horses and 500 pound-feet of torque. Like many muscle cars from the era, the LS6 came with an underrated power rating to keep insurance costs down, so actual output was in excess of 500 horsepower. For much of the classic muscle car era, General Motors had a weird ban on engines over 400 cubic inches of displacement in its division's midsize cars. Because of this, Chevys could never compete with mighty Mopar street machines, but finally, in 1970, GM lifted the arbitrary ban and the Chevelle SS was one of the biggest beneficiaries. 5. 1971 Pontiac GTO Judge Convertible. The second convertible on our list is the highly coveted Pontiac GTO Judge of the early 1970s. A popular nameplate back in the day in coupe trim, the GTO Judge didn't get that much attention on the drop-top trim. The Judge was discontinued after 1971 and the coupes aren't exactly easy to find either, at 340 examples. The Judge came with Pontiac's most powerful engine at the time, a 7.5-liter V8 rated at 335 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. The mill was part of the Mountain Performance package that was standard on the GTO Judge. 1971 was the last year of the second-generation GTO as well as the discontinuation of the Judge Performance trim. Despite having modest horsepower when compared to the 454s and 426 Hemis of the day, the 71 GTO Judge was surprisingly quick and incredibly fast. 4. 1969 Chevrolet Corvette ZL1. Chevrolet redesigned the Corvette in 1968 and turned it into a meaner-looking car. Based on the Coke bottle-shaped design, which was becoming popular at the time, the C3 Corvette was backed by powerful V8 engines and impressive performance credentials. At launch, the L71 was the most powerful engine at 435 horsepower, but Chevy also offered the L88 option. A race-spec engine, this V8 packed 430 horses officially, but it featured unique performance upgrades such as a high-capacity 4-barrel carburetor, aluminum heads, and an ultra-high compression ratio. In 1969, Chevy took things up a notch with the ZL1, which replaced the L88 engine with an all-aluminum, 7.0-liter V8 designed specifically for racing. The ZL1 option was quite expensive at around $4,700, which matched the sticker of a 1969 Corvette. The package also required other mandatory options of around $550. As a result, only 3 cars were sold to the public. The Camaro ZL1 with the same engine, for instance, was built in 69 units. Rated at almost 500 horsepower, the Corvette ZL1 was the fastest production car at the time. It's also considered the holy grail of Corvettes among collectors and enthusiasts. A 1969 Chevrolet Corvette ZL1 sold for $3.2 million in 2023 at a Sotheby's auction, making it one of the most expensive American performance cars of all time. Chevy was notorious for understating the horsepower of its engines, and most experts think the 427 in the 69 Corvette ZL1 was packing over 500 ponies. The 0 to 60 in quarter-mile times seem to back that assertion up, as they are quite impressive at a time when American V8 muscle gave almost every car some oomph. 3. 1967/1970 Dodge Coronet R/T426 Hemi Convertible. I bet you didn't expect to find the Dodge Coronet for the second time on this list, but it seems that the W23 isn't the only rare incarnation of the nameplate. Aside from creating the drag-ready W23 in 1967, Dodge also introduced the R/T Road and Track package for the Coronet. The R/T was available with the then-new 7.0-liter Hemi V8 engine, but only a few were made in 1967, of which just 2 were convertibles. The same happened in 1970, when the Coronet R/T was fitted with an updated Hemi engine. Although Dodge built quite a few R/T models, only 2 featured a drop-top body style. So if you're into rare muscle car convertibles, the 1967 and 1970 Coronet R/T Hemi are the rarest you can buy. Except that you can't really buy them since they don't pop up for sale too often. And when they do, they cost in excess of $300,000, while the 1970 models are estimated at more than $1 million. If you like rare classic cars, this is among the vehicles you should be looking for. The 5th generation Dodge Coronet, 1965 to 1970, 2 doors were designed to be stripped down, no-frills rides with tons of power. They weren't specifically built for the track, but when they came equipped with the 426 Street Hemi, they were basically factory drag cars that came with back seats and radios. 2. 1967 Shelby Cobra Super Snake. The Shelby Cobra is one of the most iconic American cars ever built, but it was rather short-lived. Carroll Shelby began importing bodies of the ACAs from the UK in 1962, and production ended only 5 years later, in 1967. But Carroll sent the Cobra into the history books with a big bang by creating the Super Snake. It was fitted with mufflers, a windshield and bumpers in order to make it street legal. The S/C wasn't, but it retained many race-spec components. The biggest modification was the addition of a pair of Paxton superchargers, which increased the power of the 7.0-liter V8 engine to a whopping 800 horsepower. With a power-to-weight ratio similar to a modern supercar, the Super Snake needed a little over 3 seconds to hit 60 miles per hour from a standing start, while top speed was close to 200 miles per hour. Carroll built just 2 cars, one for him and one for comedian Bill Cosby, his close friend. Cosby found the car too difficult to keep under control, an experience he recounted on his stand-up comedy bit 200 mph, and returned the car to Shelby. The Super Snake was shipped to a dealer in San Francisco, which sold it to a customer. Legend has it that he lost control of the car and drove it off a cliff into the Pacific Ocean. Shelby drove his Super Snake for many years. In 2021, the only remaining Super Snake was auctioned off for $5.5 million, a record for a vehicle made in the US at the time. Needless to say, no rare American muscle car would be complete without this beast. Any Shelby Cobra is a difficult car for an inexperienced driver to handle because they not only have massive horsepower but also a freaky power-to-weight ratio. Wrestler Bill Goldberg owns one, and he is on the record as saying the car terrifies him with its uncontrollable power. The Super Snake is like that, only scarier. 1. 1967 Shelby Mustang GT500 Super Snake. In 1965, just 1 year after Ford had introduced the Mustang, Carroll Shelby started rolling out beefed-up versions of the pony car. By 1967, Shelby had rolled out both the GT350 and GT500. While the former was a lightweight, track-prepped model, the latter featured a larger V8 and more of a road-going monster. Also in 1967, Shelby built a special GT500 for Goodyear to help the company promote a new line of tires. So Carroll dropped a 7.0-liter V8 engine from the Ford GT40 MKI race car and created the Super Snake. Also fitted with an upgraded transmission and rear end, the Super Snake was capable of reaching 170 miles per hour, an impressive benchmark for the era. Originally, Shelby planned on building 50 examples, but the project was shelved when Ford found out that it would cost twice as much as a normal GT500. The remaining car was restored recently and auctioned off for $2.2 million in 2019. This sticker makes it the most valuable Mustang ever built. Good luck on buying it anytime soon because it's the rarest muscle car ever. Being a one-of-a-kind ride means the 1967 Shelby Mustang GT500 Super Snake has never been reviewed or road-tested by the automotive press. Unfortunately, that also means there is no real reliable source for specs or performance, but chances are it's pretty damn fast. Another sure bet is that whoever bought this ultra-rare Mustang isn't about to put it through the paces at the track.
I hope to inspire you and help you learn more about your favorite theme. Subscribe to my channel and let me know what you think.